2018 was an important anniversary year. As 2018 comes to an end, it'll probably be another 50 years before we start talking about how many years it's been since 1968. 50 years ago, 1968 was just an unbelievably calamitous year. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis. Robert Kennedy had just won the California presidential primary. He, too, was assassinated on the campaign trail. The Democratic National Convention that year was overtaken, basically, by furious anti-Vietnam protests. The country was in all sorts of turmoil, politically and otherwise. And the morning after the 1968 presidential election felt like kind of a hangover. Richard Nixon had won the 1968 presidential election by the slightest of margins in a race that didn't get officially decided until the following day. But there was one ray of sunshine for Democrats that year, that day, that would end up resonating for a really long time after. It would end up resonating right into this year's elections in 2018.
For the first time, the House will have a black woman member, Shirley Chisolm, from the sometimes explosive Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn.
Shirley Chisolm was a children's educator from Brooklyn. Her opponent for Congress that year was the somewhat idiosyncratic civil rights leader James Farmer, who was really famous at the time. He ran on the Liberal Party ticket. He got the backing of the Republican Party. But on Election Day, it was the Democratic candidate, Shirley Chisolm, who beat the odds. She won her Brooklyn district 2-1. It was an historic win. But given everything else going on at the time, getting people to pay attention to the historic nature of Shirley Chisolm's win, it wasn't easy. Well, it wasn't easy until she arrived in Washington, D.C., and then it became quite clear that people were definitely going to know who was Shirley Chisolm.
In the 12th Congressional District of New York last fall, a school teacher named Mrs. Shirley Chisolm was elected to Congress. The 12th District is the Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn, a solid concrete urban slum. Last week, Mrs. Chisolm was given her congressional committee assignments by the House leadership. To her utter surprise, she was placed on agriculture subcommittees dealing with forestry and rural development. She complained.
She complained. One of the first things Shirley Chisolm did when she got to Congress was to complain, was to speak out against her ridiculous committee assignment and against the leaders of her party in Congress who had given her that assignment. And I know that sounds like a little process thing, no big deal, right? Honestly, though, people did not do that, especially as soon as they arrived for their first day in Congress. People did what the party leadership told them to do. There wasn't even a process in place to not do that if you wanted to object. But that wasn't the kind of thing that would defer or deter Shirley Chisolm.
And then it was learned that I was going to be placed on the Agricultural Committee when I went back home over the weekend. The people were surprised because they said, Shirley, hogs we don't grow hogs in the district, and we certainly don't have cotton fields. How'd you get on that committee? People, it's only natural that people are going to, if they elect you to be their representative, that they're going to hope that you can function in an area that would help them.
Shirley Chisolm's first big national stage moment was doing something nobody did, speaking out against her own party's leadership on that decision. And she won. She became the first freshman member of Congress to have a committee assignment changed by House leadership. And from there on, she just kept going.
How do you feel being the first black woman, in the House of Representatives?
I have mixed feelings. First of all, I'm very glad to have been able to make history in this country by being the first black woman. And boys and girls, as far as I'm concerned, actually, it's overdue.
There's so many things in the Congress I would like to change. I think the thing that I'd like to change more than anything else is the seniority system. The destiny of this country, which is primarily a young country, primarily peopled by younger people as a whole, is in the hands of about 15 men. 90% of them are from the South. The country is ruled by a group of old men that make up the Southern oligarchy. That's why this country is as it is. I see myself as a potential reconciler on the American scene. Time will tell whether or not this will be so.
From the moment she arrived in Washington, D.C., Congresswoman Shirley Chisolm was a force to be reckoned with. Her nickname was Fighting Shirley. But she also earned the respect of her fellow members of Congress. She went on to co-found the Congressional Black Caucus. She even ran for president. Shirley Chisolm retired after 14 years in Congress. She was asked how she would like to be remembered. She responded that she did not want to go down in history as the nation's first black congresswoman. Rather, she said, quote, "I'd like them to say that Shirley Chisolm had guts. That's how I'd like to be remembered." That is absolutely how she is remembered. After Shirley Chisolm's death in 2005, Congress commissioned a portrait of her. That's an honor typically reserved only for party leadership. But Fighting Shirley is still there in the halls of Congress, keeping an eye out. And now, over the past few weeks, members of Congress's new freshman class, the most diverse freshman class Congress has ever seen, they've been arriving at the Capitol, and they've been doing their orientation, and they've been setting up their staffs and their offices. And you know who keeps popping up these last couple of weeks? Yeah, thank God they put up that portrait. Because with Democrats picking up 40 new seats and sending Washington the most diverse and most female Congress ever, the past few weeks have been a time to remember and to honor the fact that Shirley Chisolm had guts. Coming up, we will have interviews with two new Congress members elect, both of whom defied great odds to get where they are today. Their stories are coming up next. Stay with us.